On behalf of the Counselors of Real Estate, welcome to this presentation of Corporate Real Estate, Problem Solving in an Ever-Changing Industry. Thank you for joining us. I'm David Levy, CRE, Managing Partner of Milestone Investment Research in the Boston area and Chair of the Counselors Virtual Programming Committee. The Counselors of Real Estate is a global organization of commercial property advisors addressing real estate challenges worldwide. Experienced, innovative, principled, and credentialed problem solvers, counselors reside in 22 countries, practice in many more, and offer expertise in 60 real estate disciplines across all asset classes. Each has earned the prestigious CRE designation. Let's recognize the exclusive sponsors for this event, Equus Capital Partners and Realty, the Real Estate Limited Partner Institute. Thank you both for your partnership. Before we begin, I'd like to offer you a free digital subscription to the Counselor's peer-reviewed professional journal called Real Estate Issues. It's been named one of the top 10 essential real estate publications in the U.S. Please visit cre.org/REI to subscribe. Over the next hour, you're encouraged to utilize the chat feature should you wish to submit a question. Your participation is welcomed, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows at the end of the session. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Rob Nahigian, CRE, Principal of Auburndale Realty Company in Boston. Rob provides brokerage and advisory services to corporations, family trusts, and public agencies. He's a recognized national thought leader, speaker, and author. Rob serves on the faculty of Boston University, SIOR, NAIOP, and has been a guest lecturer at several institutions of higher learning, including Harvard, MIT, Suffolk, and Northeastern. Rob was invited to membership in the Counselors in 1996. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, David. I want to thank everyone for attending. Just in case you're curious, there's about 200 people, 200 of you that are watching. So I thank you for registering. I also want to thank our panelists, which I will introduce in a second, Jim, Warren, and Laurie. And I want to thank Larissa Phillips, who's our staff person who's been working with me on this forever. My role this year has been National Vice Chair of Engagement and Retention. So some of you heard me in Detroit about some of the work that we try to accomplish. And what was interesting is in that process of bringing in speakers for Detroit, I called Warren, and Warren is at Pfizer. He's in corporate real estate, and Warren was the one who actually came up with this idea about running a standalone webinar. And since March, we've been working on this with Laurie and Jim. So just to let everybody know, it takes about 6 months, 6, 7, 8, 9 months just to put something like this together. So the whole point of this webinar and the other ones that we've been running, which is we did asset portfolio management in June, and then I did one in September on how to get into international real estate. And this one on corporate real estate is how do we add value, especially if you're a counselor. I know we have a lot of non-counselors here, but how do you expand your business opportunities? So to do that, what the four of us looked at was an outline, and have slides we'll bring up, which is, first of all, what is corporate real estate? So we're going to get into that, and what does it do? What does corporate real estate do? Because we're going to find out they do a lot more than just real estate. What is expected from the executives of corporate real estate? What are the realities of corporate real estate? And part of why you want to know the realities and what you do is because at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out, how do I get business with corporate real estate? You can't get business from corporate real estate if you don't know what it is and don't know what they do and don't know where they need the help. So, and how does corporate real estate optimize their corporation and what are their issues? And then we'll wrap it up with, okay, so how do you fit in? One of the things we do want to bring out, which you heard in Detroit, is don't pick up the phone and start cold calling Warren or Jim or Laurie saying, hey, I work at this company, we can help you. Why don't you just hire us? Because that's going to get you nowhere. So we'll get into a more strategic approach that could be helpful to everyone. So let me introduce our panel. So I'm going to start with Warren Braverman. He holds a CRE and MCR designation. Warren is the America's real estate lead for Pfizer, with global portfolio consisting of 39 million square feet, where he focuses on corporate real estate operations, portfolio and asset management, transaction management and negotiations, financial analysis, strategic planning, and operations management. Over his 35-year career in the private and public sector, he was section chief of the Resolution of Trust Corporation. Man, I remember those days, Warren. That goes back to like 1989 to 1993. During the SNL bailout and the head of corporate real estate for GMAC Mortgage, he has handled more than $5 billion in transaction value, encompassing 20 million square feet and driving over $1 billion in operating costs and portfolio efficiencies. He also served as Senior Management Director of Global Occupier Services at Cushman & Wakefield, and he was Director of Transaction Management at CBRE. He earned his MA from Temple, and he's a licensed broker, a general certified appraiser, and as I said, holds the CRE and MCR designations. Laurie is lead counsel, global real estate and workplace strategy at Pfizer, where she partners business and workplace functions to support real estate and organizational goals across the global portfolio. She drives real estate and workplace strategy for major initiatives and requirements, including the company's headquarters transformation, M&A integrations, and complex facilities construction and leading projects. Among them, Pfizer's LEED and WELL Platinum headquarters at Hudson Yards, which is in New York City. We actually toured that last year in our CRE convention, and a new 200,000 square foot R&D campus. Laurie's been involved in over 30 million square feet of real estate deals with a value exceeding $5 billion. She also chairs Cornet Global's NYC Sustainability Committee. For those who don't know, Cornet Global is where you get your MCR designation, which is Master in Corporate Real Estate. She's a member of its end user forum and previously served as an advisor to the International Well Building Institute. She has a BS from Cornell, a JD from Penn, and Cornet's MCR and L and lead AP credential. Then we have Jim Terrell. Jim's like on the other side in retail, and I've heard his stories, and he's got stories on top of stories about Sears Holdings. He was a CEO of real estate. He presided over the repurposing, divestiture, and subleasing of more than 4,500 assets of virtually every asset class. His career spanned more than 36 years. He's handled over 450 million square feet, including corporate real estate, senior management positions as Senior Vice President of Real Estate for Ashley Furniture, focusing on retail growth and internal consulting, as well as senior positions at Realty and consulting firms. I can tell you that when Sears had their problem, Jim then went into the consulting side, and he was working with Eddie Lampert on a lot of divestitures and acquisitions, both for Kmart and Sears. And most recently, he was at B. Riley Real Estate Partners. He's a graduate of St. Bonaventure, and I can tell you that he also has been a 5-year guest lecturer at Boston University, because that's where I teach, and he's been kind enough to share his time. All right, I'm going to move to the slides, if that's all right with everybody. And come on, slideshow. Wow. Okay, so it's up and running. And we've already talked about this, so I'm going to keep moving along. So I'm just going to cover the first slide, and then we'll have everybody kind of chime in. So as it says, what, so what, now what? And as you can see, actually, Warren put this together, but as we go through this wheel of what is corporate real estate, we go through, what are the agents of change, corporate real estate leaders? How are you being impactful? What is the portfolio automation? I think what's interesting about the wheel is the fact that this may work for one company, may be different for another company, may be different if you're in life science, but might be a little different if you're in the retail side of it. And it may not all be, this is all encompassing, right? So it says multidiscipline cross-functional interaction with the corporate enterprise. I see this just as that. It is a well cross-functional interaction. But as a service provider, you may not be hitting all of these. You may be hitting some of it. Then we have economic impact, financial implications, the areas of focus for corporate real estate. What is the future of work? Certainly office is certainly a question we've been asking since COVID. Where's office workers going? Technology. We probably won't get into it today, but certainly AI plays a big role in where corporate real estate goes, and then sustainability. All right, so we're going to turn to Warren on the next slide, which is what is corporate real estate? So
Great. Yep. Thanks, Rob. And I too am very, very excited and very passionate about corporate real estate. Most of my career has been in corporate real estate, so I'm always excited when we can spend some quality time focusing on the topic and the industry. So I want to first start by saying, it's all about people. So whether it's employees, whether it's about shareholders, whether it's about stakeholders, it's all about people. And as Rob pointed out, it is a most definite cross-functional, very diverse area of specialization. And I point that out because we will rely on external resources to supplement what we have available internally, which provides a wonderful opportunity for folks that are on the phone with respect to working with the various disciplines, whether it be operations, facilities, legal, environmental, health, safety. All of those are areas that we in corporate real estate would be interfacing with. Another thing really quick is the metamorphosis or the transformation that we're seeing when it comes to corporate real estate. 10, 15 years ago, it was a function that always reported up through finance. Now you're seeing that change more to where it's reporting up through HR, a recognition of the importance of the people experience. So it's not necessarily just about cost, but it's also about the employee or the colleague experience. What we do is obviously manage, optimize a corporation's real estate portfolio. And in the old days, we also used to do that more as an operational function, and now it is more strategic. Strategic in the sense that ensuring that properties are effectively aligned with business goals, ensuring real estate supports operational efficiency, cost effectiveness, talent attraction and retention, while managing acquisition, leasing portfolio. That's all the tactical execution. Then on the left, I just want to quickly touch, these to me are the three buckets of focus that we have as corporate real estate leaders, looking to improve colleague experience, amenities, better fit for purpose, productivity, efficiency, obviously, as Rob also pointed out, technology. You do that through reduction. So reduction of footprint, seats and capacity, and that obviously translates to cost. We are always looking to be as cost effective as possible. And then lastly, the area of sustainability, which addresses things like reduction in emissions, agreement with landlord for future investments to achieve these net zero goals. I'd like to, Rob, quickly just bring in Laurie, because interestingly, Laurie and I had a conversation about sustainability, and I'd like for her to share some of her discussions and experiences with other real estate leads regarding sustainability, because I think it's very insightful. Laurie, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Warren. And so for sustainability, to me, this is really pointing out that in a lot of ways, corporate real estate is about the long-term play for a company with its portfolio. And it looks at what is the resilience of both the facilities for the company and also the resilience of its people. How is it supporting its employees in terms of how they come to work and what they do when they work? And it's, in the retail side, its customers as well, and business partners. And so when we talk about sustainability, and then when a lot of real estate leads think about it, it's got to be obviously turned into a financial consideration, and how does it really impact the business in the long term. So you're looking at the reduction in emissions and the net zero goals, both because you have an enterprise goal. A lot of companies are going out with net zero goals on the enterprise side, but you're also thinking on the real estate side, okay, how are my facilities, how are my buildings going to last through whatever happens. And the one example I like to give is where Pfizer had a warehouse that was impacted by a tornado, right? So as these types of weather events happen, right, facilities and corporate facilities get impacted. And then real estate has to react in terms of a lot of crisis management, but also, figuring out, okay, how do we get ourselves back on track? But then also thinking about, okay, so going forward, how do we make sure that we are placed and designed in a way that this does not happen and impact us in the same way?
Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. What's interesting already to me is what you're describing. And I know we're going to talk about next few slides, but you're describing things that aren't exactly real estate. I mean, you're already into other parts of running the business. And if I was new at the business, I'd be thinking, well, wait a minute, don't you go out and find buildings and either buy them or sell them or lease them? And, now we're talking about sustainability, because I know, Laurie, you're a lead AP person. So that's becoming important. I was thinking of Boston with resiliency, that's what they call it, because anything along the Boston Harbor, and we've got the seaport there, we have to worry about floods and have to worry about it like, in the next 10 years is what we're hearing. But we've had some massive floods of office and commercial buildings. I mean, Vertex is downtown. So they had, I don't know if they had an issue, but they're right on the harbor. So those are other forms of maybe sustainability. But I want the audience just to think about it. This is getting a little more into more technical services that you have to provide that just goes beyond maybe what we've been taught over the years. All right, Jim, what's the reality, Jim? What is the reality of what corporate real estate should be doing?
Well, we should be doing everything. The expectation is that we should be thought leaders particularly in retail, where the real estate portfolio represents the second largest investment on the balance sheet. And if you think about it on a normal bell curve, you have the responsibility to acquire, to manage, and then redeploy or dispose of underutilized assets. That's within the framework of having multiple internal and external constituencies that you have to address and listen to. You're to provide a thought leadership, but you're also supposed to be very responsive to the needs and future desires of the businesses, the operations. Warren touched on the operating people. You also have to be very responsive to the needs of your employees, as well as to the external factors such as disasters. You have to be capable of responding and understanding what needs to be done. And you're also governed by a written document, either a purchase agreement or some agreement with the community or with a lease that directs your responsibility. So in the corporate real estate, you touch on virtually each and every element of a business, and you need to understand that. And you have to be responsive to it. And in many cases, the corporate real estate function actually has a direct linkage to the C-suite, either, as Warren pointed out, HR, finance, or in the case of Eddie Lampert, or Todd Wanick in the case of Ashley Furniture. So you have to be cognizant that the very intense focus on corporate real estate, and it has short-term objectives and long-term objectives that you have to address as you make a presentation to get the share of the capital that you need to accomplish what you need to do. And then there's always the intense scrutiny on the expense structure of corporate real estate. So those are the driving factors of that which, particularly in a retail format, represents the profit driver. Your headquarter building in a retail scenario is a cost. The ability to identify and create profit generating locations is key to the survival of a retailer.
So, so I wrote down some notes. This is kind of interesting. I remember going through the MCR program at Cornet, and all I kept hearing from my colleagues that were in corporate real estate is how corporate real estate looks at the real estate department as a liability. And I don't mean a cost liability. Like, they're underpaid, overworked. You don't bring in any revenues. And I would argue, well, what if you negotiate a lease and you saved like a ton of money? And someone said, yeah, I saved a ton of money on the lease value, but we're still paying rent. So it led to another discussion, like, who do you end up answering to? I would think that if I was working with corporate real estate, I'm answering to Warren Braverman, or I'm answering to Jim Terrell. And then I hear, well, wait a minute. No, I'm actually internally a service provider. I mean, do you answer to like different business units? Do you answer to people above you, below you? Can you make your own decisions?
So,
I mean, who do you actually work for?
Yeah, Rob, because you're spot on. Hence why it is a highly stressful industry to be in. But I will tell you this: it is all about relationship management. So you are spot on in the sense that we are dealing with multiple clients, whether it's the budget holder, whether it's stakeholders, shareholders, CFO, CEO. What's important, and it kind of gets back to the first tranche here on the slide, is, what is your purpose? And I do think mature companies do recognize the contribution and the value add, albeit we are a cost, but what we contribute to the company. So where I'm headed is, the company needs to recognize that corporate real estate needs to ensure that it's the right real estate with the right structure in the right location at the right cost and serving the benefit of the overall enterprise. And that you need to measure your performance as well as be that assertive, thought-provoking, insightful advisor, as well as tactical executioner. So I would just add that to what Jim and you have pointed out.
So go ahead, Laurie.
I was just going to add, because I think that what you're raising is a really good point. And the nuance with corporate real estate is, as Jim pointed out, it's a huge cost to the company, but it's also not the core business of the company. And so that's the rub with corporate real estate, where it's enabling the business, but it's not the core business. And in certain types of, depending on the type of company, the real estate itself, the real estate asset, has maybe more or less importance, right? So for a retailer where the physical stores are really important, great. If it's, a life sciences company where you're doing R&D in the labs, or you're doing manufacturing on site, the real estate facility has much more importance. For some of the professional services companies, organizations, the real estate I mean, we saw this during COVID where people were able to work from home and the business could continue. So it has the varying importance, and the corporate real estate function has to work around that and weigh that with its
So
partners.
Jim, you're on the retail side. I mean, is that true on the retail side at Sears? I mean, because, you know, I wonder, like, maybe you tell me the real estate's a lot more important to you.
Well, the actual site of the retail stores is very important. But keep in mind, to run a retailer, you have to have a headquarters, you have to have distribution centers. If you're a multi-pronged, omni-channel retailer, and in the case of Sears, you also had a service business, you had a lot of ancillary businesses, you had relationships with your vendors, and where their locations are. You had overseas operations. Same with the furniture business. You have overseas operations. So and each one of them, each one of the management teams that is responsible for those facilities puts a demand on the corporate real estate function. Now, and so it is, and plus we dealt with a legacy. I mean, that's the other thing. You're dealt, you deal with the cards you're dealt. We had locations that were opened up in 1887, and retail stores that went from 4,000 square feet to 440,000 square feet, and everything in between. And each one of those assets comes with a series of issues, nuances that have to be addressed, and you have to have the capacity to understand. And this is where service providers can provide great expertise. I mean, you don't have the wherewithal to have the number of people that you would typically have to manage a portfolio of that magnitude. So you rely on the expertise for boots on the ground of a service provider, and they have to provide credible information in the context that we're servicing a series of disciplines, not the least of which is procurement, IT, finance, M&A. I mean, we haven't even addressed the fact that you're a key role in the acquisition of companies. So each and every one of those disciplines, in a headquarters building, the emotion that is associated with office space, windows, location, proximity, parking, and that type of thing. It's really that's what makes it fascinating, but that's what makes it challenging, is that you are, and that's where it gives an opportunity for service providers who are creative and disciplined and can bring a solution, to a person such as myself, really become a partner and addressing a lot of the issues that we face.
All right, Laurie, let's go to what C-suite expects from commercial real estate leaders or corporate real estate leaders. What does the C-suite expect? C-suite being the CEO, CFO, and CEO, for those who don't know.
So at its core, the C-suite expects the CRE leader to understand the business, right? Because the corporate real estate, as we've talked about, is there to help the business achieve its business goals, right? To be able to operate and to provide a place for its employees, its customers, and its business partners. So it's really important for the internal CRE leaders to understand the specifics of that particular business. What kind of a company are you? What industry are you in? And as detailed as possible in terms of understanding the types of operations that you have. It's also important to understand the people, right? Because as Warren pointed out, it's about the people. So you need to understand what the culture is and what types of employees you have, the types of functions that they're doing, so that you can be providing the spaces that serve them best. And then you need to understand, as a lot of these circles speak to, what assets do you have in the portfolio, right? So what do you have? What are your real estate holdings and what's possible? Are they in the best place? Because what you're going to ultimately end up doing is needing to look at the portfolio at a high level and think about, okay, well, how can we optimize it to work best for where the company is going, both in a location perspective and also in a business growth, in the type, whatever business lines you're going into. Right. So it's really very specific, and understanding that that detail.
So as I was thinking of a couple of things when you said that, you were talking about, knowing what it is you own and what, so the first thing I'm thinking is, how does a company not know what it's own? Then I was thinking about a project that was on in 1980, and it was for HUD. And HUD hired, I worked for an architectural firm. We had 4 companies, including Coopers and Libran. HUD did not know what it owned for public housing. And there are thousands of projects around the country. That was our job, was to go around for 2 years trying to figure out, what do you own and what condition are these units in, because they didn't know how to spend them. They didn't know where and what to spend money on because they didn't know what they have. So I started thinking about lease administration, because I know that students I've had at BU who do lease administration for major companies have said there are a lot of times we don't even know what we're leasing. We don't even have a copy of the lease. We get bills that come in. I'm trying to explain to the audience, like, how is it that you don't know? We don't know our leases. We get bills for reimbursements. The company's policy is just pay the bills. And then lease administration finally looks at the leases and said, we're getting bills for things we shouldn't be paying for. So, I mean, that's just an example of, how a company can be so big. I think that they don't know what they own. I think what's also important, Warren, I'd be interested, because I've heard this from other corporate real estate people. How many people actually work in corporate real estate, like in a department?
That's a great question. So first, Rob, I want to say, it doesn't surprise me that there are quite a number of companies that are always challenged with, they don't know what they have. And that is foundationally the first thing you always want to attack as a corporate real estate leader. What do you have? Make sure your information from a data integrity, from a document control standpoint, are reliable, and reliable decisions can be made. So typically, a corporate real estate department, global, typically it's broken up into regions. So you might see Americas or US, Latin America, EMEA, and APAC. You'll then see specialization within the function. So there could be a vertical line for facilities. There'll be a vertical line for lease administration. I might add, lease administration, very labor intensive, although AI is definitely making a lasting inroad in assuming quite a bit of, or I should say assuming, in complementing and helping out that function. You've got construction management, you've got portfolio analytics, you might have a finance group that just focuses on the financial elements within corporate real estate. And, it could, I'm sure Jim could probably address that as well, but, for 50 million square feet, you could easily have a department of 20, 30 people. I will tell you this, though, there is a tremendous push, and it continues, to outsource. So, another thing I would just add, Rob, is we within corporate real estate, Laurie and I talk about this over lunch all the time, is looking with an external or an expanded lens. Don't be myopic and just think entirely about Pfizer. We need to look outside and see how other people, peer companies, are doing things, best practices, resourcing, taking advantage of scalability of expertise. So I didn't mean to be long-winded, Rob. Hopefully that answered
No, that was good. I mean, I was thinking, so one of my old clients who I think he's like, doesn't work anymore, but he's a great guy, Rick Little. He used to be the head of real estate at Weyerhaeuser. And, he would always say, So I went to his offices. It's in Federal Way outside of Seattle. It was nothing more than a cubicle. There were 3 cubicles. He goes, there's 3 of us that work the country. That's it. And you don't have the same support, personnel support. But he always said, when we go to a location, a warehouse location, warehouser location, that's my client. And I couldn't understand that because you brought it up too. You kept saying, well, we've got clients. I'm like, who the hell is your client? You work for Pfizer. So you'd go to a location that has a Pfizer manager and you go, that's my client. I'm like, that's not your client. The guy works for Pfizer. You work for Pfizer. But that's not how real estate departments think. I mean, Jim, did you think that way when you go to retail locations? Because this gets into then, if that's my client, that's the business unit, and therefore relationship, that's what we mean by relationships. It's like we don't tell them what to do. They tell us what they need, and then there's a whole different decision-making process, but we don't necessarily drive the truck. That's kind of where I'm going with it. But Jim, when you were at Sears, how did you see the locations and the managers?
Well, let me step back a moment, and when you say you talk about not knowing what you own, for years and years and years until approximately 2006, Kmart ran their real estate portfolio on an Excel spreadsheet. There was not any, and as companies grow, young companies grow, the last thing to get justified is a real estate system, because it's not key to the growth engine. All right, the key is get out there and get the properties, and then you figure it out on the back end. Similarly, with venture capital firms now that are buying companies, they don't have backroom operations like a legacy retailer or a legacy company would have. So they're dealing with, as you see, venture capital firms acquiring these things. If they don't have, or companies are split off like the dollar stores and that type of thing, they don't have backroom operations, which is an opportunity for third-party providers, but also a great opportunity to lose track of what you own. Now, in terms of the management of store management, the store manager or the field personnel can be your ally, or they can be incentivized not to be helpful, because they're responsible for a P&L, and if I can defer expenses, even though I'm obligated to pay for them I'm obligated to keep the building in good repair. But if I can defer it, and my short-term gain versus long-term pain, so that's where, and you don't have the wherewithal to go and visit them all. And so there's kind of this dichotomy of interests that occur both on all internal resources.
So Jim,
Yeah,
let me ask. Go ahead. I
No,
have
go
to ask
ahead.
this, Jim. Are your managers, and more in the same question, are your managers getting salary plus bonus based on profit or based on revenues?
They're based on, in our case, it was a manufactured P&L at the store level.
So P&L, profit and loss, means income and expenses. You're driving the rent part of it, right? The expense side of it, which the manager is like, look, I'm just trying to think of, I've heard this before, this argument. Like the issue I have with you, Jim, is you're driving my real estate costs and it's not helping me. And internally, my salary contract is based this profit and loss. And so, if so, I guess it kind of gets to the audience understanding who's paying the rent. Is it corporate or is it the local?
Well,
is it the location? Go ahead, Laurie.
And I think that's the key, right? Is different companies do it differently. So
Right.
some companies have a centralized budget for real estate and others have it either store-based or country-based or some other type of a budget setup. And like you're saying, that encourages different incentives. So is the corporate real estate owning the budget, and so they are responsible and they can push out standards that work across the company, and everybody has to really, maybe advocate on a country level or a site level to say, hey, could you please put this into my site? But ultimately corporate real estate owns that decision. or does the site end up being able to decide and being able to push it? And that drives different behaviors
So
depending on how
doesn't,
the company sets it up.
one of the questions I was going to ask Warren and Jim, and you may not want to answer it, or maybe you can't, but when, as I go through Cornet, you keep hearing how, my question is, how do your bills get paid? How does your salary, where's your salary getting funded? And so you hear at some companies, it's the revenues that are being generated by the salespeople. And so, I mean, I've heard these stories about the salespeople that are driving like $50 million in revenues. And then you're trying to go in saying, look, we're going to move your offices. I literally heard this from, I guess I'll say it, I think it was Oracle, and it was in class. And they said, we had to move these offices in San Francisco. And the sales guy says, my office size better be exactly the same size. And he measured it and said, it better not be off by a half an inch. They go to the new offices. He measures it. It was off by a half inch. He told the real estate guy, rip that wall down and make it a half inch taller. And I said, why would you put up with that kind of crap? He says, because he's going to call his boss, who's going to call the regional vice president, who's going to chew me out because this guy is bringing in $50 million or $100 million and I'm not. So I have to move that stinking wall. And so,
Rob,
go ahead, Warren.
no, I would just say to you, to me, and Laurie was spot on there, you got to get to root cause. So to me, the dilemma, Rob, that you're describing or characterizing, it's a whole thing about space management, open plan, and that's a battle that corporate real estate continues to contend with. And to your point, the revenue generation is still tops for any company. So to your point, that is a struggle we go through all the time. And that's why corporate real estate is a team sport that necessitates collaboration, meeting to a common good for the company. But Rob, that's definitely a rub that we contend with every day, every day.
And
Yeah.
Rob,
And go ahead.
go ahead,
Jim.
please, Rob.
No, I was just gonna add on to what Warren's saying, is that you have the personal element that comes into play in corporate real estate. So it's not always rational decision-making, because so much of it, like for that one person you're describing, is personal. It's their individual office. And so that ends up coming into play as well.
Jim?
Rob, what I was, we had many organizations have manufactured P&Ls at the local unit level, which means that, they have key performance indicators that they want the store managers to focus on. And generally it's variable expenses. The fixed expenses fall below what's called below the line. However, two faults with that. Number one is they're also responsible for the appearance of the store. And if they have to make roof repairs and decide not to because the lease requires it and there's buckets on the floor and they choose to defer that, we'll hear about it from the landlord. The other side of it too is a lot of store managers they are doing quite well against their key performance indicators, but the store is not performing well in comparison to the balance of the stores. So when a landlord goes in and you're trying to negotiate a rent reduction from a landlord, and he says, well, your store manager says that we're knocking the cover off the ball, that's not very helpful. And because we have the ability at a central level to identify all the economics of a store, whereas at the local level they're focused on their key performance indicators, and therein lies a rub. And landlords are very good at taking advantage of that and speaking. And no matter what you say, the store manager are very proud of their performance. And yet it causes a conflict with our efforts to try and reduce the costs of the facility.
I think,
Rob,
go ahead, Warren.
no, just Jim really hit the nail right on the head in the sense that corporate real estate, we are looking out for the enterprise. That's our job. Whereas the elements that you're describing, I'm not lessening them, they are looking out for their particular business line, whatever else. We're looking at it from enterprise. And I just want to quickly share, Laurie and I concluded a major sublease of about 150,000 square feet, probably equates to like $200 million. And I can tell you, we were getting pushed on elements that we said, no, our job is to protect the enterprise, right? We need to provide flexibility for potential reabsorption. And then the other thing you're going to get beaten up about is it's not fast enough. Why should it take this long to do a transaction? But transactions are very much involved. So I just wanted to add that.
No, I think it's great. I'm sitting here thinking, look, if I was like, let's just say a broker on an assignment, you have to understand that if I'm working with Warren Braverman and you're giving me one set of assignments, and then you go, I want you to work with the local guy because he's going to be very important in this, I may be getting a different set of instructions from him. And it has happened. And I'm saying, I don't know who I'm answering to, because Warren says I'm supposed to do it this way. This guy says, I don't care. I want to go no less than, 30 miles from this location. I want this amount of square feet. And at the end of the day, I don't know who's answering to who. And am I wasting my time trying to find if it's real estate related? Am I doing a site search? It's just going to be a waste. I'm starting all over again.
Rob, my only coaching to that is you align yourself to corporate real estate, because that is absolutely going to happen. And who you answer to is ultimately corporate real estate. The corporate real estate leader handles all of the navigation, getting consensus, getting things right, that it ultimately plays out.
All right, I'm moving the slides along because I think we're hitting those points on those slides. I don't think we have to go in a specific, hit each point specifically, but let's go to automation. Now, we've kind of talked about it just through these discussions, but let's go to Warren and Jim on this. So what is corporate real estate automation? What is the strategy, Warren? One thing that's kind of interesting, because Laurie brought it up, if I was in corporate real estate and someone said, we want to open a research and development lab facility. Here's the question I have, Warren. How long does it take in your industry to get a solution from start to end? Meaning, if I'm going to do research and development, how long does it take to actually find a cure? Number one, like in terms of years.
Yeah. So we're talking highly specialized space, and Laurie can rattle this off as much as me, but by the time you go into the market, find a location or figure out where you want to be, negotiate the deal, fit out, commission, pass all the regulatory requirements, you are easily 24 to 36 months.
I mean, in terms of actually working on a drug.
Oh, I apologize. That years. And actually right now, Rob, the push is acquire instead of organically create. So you acquire a company that is developing a particular drug. Laurie, I don't know offhand. I mean, I know the R&D cost is significant, but I don't know on average. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, and I don't know specifically. I mean, obviously the COVID vaccine was very accelerated. But there's one thing to note in terms of the sites, it's not all necessarily developed at the same site, right? And so, for example, we had this with the vaccine where we needed a very specialized property for one specific point in the development, and there was practically nothing available, right? And so then that affects your negotiating leverage, obviously, when you see how much is available in the market. The other thing is that in the life sciences, for manufacturing sites, you need to have certain types of licensing. So there's a ramp up. So even once you've got your site selected and locked down, whether it be owned or leased, you then have to go through a whole regulatory period. So that adds on to the process in terms of being able to move a product to a site.
Here's the point of that discussion. I'm sitting here thinking, then you probably, this is what I've heard. I've heard it can take 10, 12 years to bring a drug, and it may not even work, right? It may be a fit, you try and it doesn't work. and you're paying a lot of money for a lot of PhDs that are in there. And then, Warren, we talked about this in the prep meeting about the redundancies. Like, you can't have a drug that's in testing and you get the temperature down to 200 degrees below Fahrenheit, and all of a sudden the power goes off and that temperature changes by 5 degrees, ruins the test, because that is how sensitive it is. And you have to start all over with 10 years. So you might say to me, someone might say to me, why do I care if I'm a real estate provider? Because my question would be, why would you be leasing when you should be owning?
Oh,
And
okay.
owning might cost you more money, but now we're talking about control. And the fact is, you don't need a landlord's approval to do any of this stuff. I mean, I would just throw that out as a question to a corporate real estate person. And you might say, yeah, well, good point. Maybe we should be taking a 20-year lease, though. I mean, these are just things that when you're talking about how real estate fits into the corporate strategy, which I have on the board, that you can't be a real estate person going, well, I did a survey of the market and this building's going to cost this much, or the lease is here and I can negotiate a better deal. It's like, oh, how does it fit with the corporate strategy? Right? So, Jim, how about you? I mean, you're on the retail side.
Well, couple of things. Real estate, if you look at a balance sheet, the value of the real estate is probably not reflective of the market value of the real estate. So when you talk about optimization strategy, the corporate real estate organization needs to understand what the inherent value of the properties are, particularly if you own them. I mean, we owned a store in Santa Monica that, was on the balance sheet at its original cost. It was worth over $200 million. And you can't make enough money in a retail store to justify not jettisoning that property if someone's willing to pay you $200 million because it was within walking distance of the Santa Monica Pier. So that's the one thing that you have to be, that the balance sheet, and obviously I'm not speaking out of school in the sense that an awful lot of equity players, venture capital firms have bought retailers strictly based on the fact that their value as real estate was higher than what's on the balance sheet. Number two is you have to, I've never met a merchant who didn't expect that if you gave him 10 million square feet, he or she'd be able to fill it with product and sell it. So rationalizing square footage and optimizing square footage is a real challenge and a real opportunity for an outside provider to sit down there and say, there's a lot of demand for your space. And so if you could shrink your space, we could bring in third parties and optimize and create a revenue floor in addition to your retail, which is candidly not often well received by the internal constituents because everybody thinks that square footage is free.
Mm. All right, I'm looking at the clock. I know we want to leave a few minutes for Q&A. So I only skipped this slide because we've been talking about it. But I'd like to get to, this is our last slide, and we're going to open up for Q&A. So what? How does the real estate advisor fit into all this?
So
I'll
Rob,
start with Warren. Go ahead.
Yep. So first of all, David through the chat raised a perfect point. Why wouldn't you do a lease versus buy analysis? And you're absolutely right. I strongly recommend this. To get is to give. And what I mean by that is you need to be proactive in sharing information to corporate real estate departments, not with the intention of scoring an assignment day one. It is definitely a journey for you. And as I said, to get is to give. So provide that information. Don't drown the real estate. Don't drown Laurie with data. You want to be insightful with what you provide her. Give her recommendations. Actually, Laurie and I were in a meeting and we were like wondering, what is this person telling us? They obviously never listened to what our pain points are to be serving up suggestions that would resolve these pain points. So listen, be very attentive and serve up the information that you or the data that you are an expert in, whether it's local, whether it's global, whether it's unique to anything in particular. I just wanted to kind of underscore that because I would say that is an area of weakness that I find with external service providers reaching out.
How about you,
Yeah.
Jim?
Well, I think, to kind of echo what Warren's saying, but also a third party has to be able to read the room and understand that we're servicing an awful lot of internal and external constituents. And the fact of the matter is, there's a great deal of frustration when someone comes in and says, I have someone who wants to buy your property. Well, you don't understand what I have to go through to really make sure that that's the economic decision that we want to make as a company. And there's parts of the strategy, the corporate strategy, I can't share with you. And it creates a source of frustration. So as you're speaking to the Warrens and Lauries of the world, you need to be able to read the room and say, all right, I'm going to be gut honest with you, and here's what I think, here's where I'm coming from, and not try and gloss over it, because we're painfully aware of our internal strategy that I may or may not be able to share with you. And I'm imploring you to provide information, not because I'm trying to job you from a fee standpoint, but I have to digest it, communicate it, and then execute on it. And that may or may not include you. And so it's just candor. Dollar certain, day certain is a key phrase that we always use. And you'll feel my pain, and trust me, you will. But if we develop a relationship, it'll be beneficial for both of us down the road.
Laurie?
Yeah, I mean, I think Warren and Jim hit it on the head. I will also add that there is opportunity for advisors outside of some of the portfolio planning elements of real estate that we've talked about, right? There's M&A integration. That's a huge one. There's corporate art programs. There's activation, right? And all of the workplace experience activity that's happening right now, hospitality, and also thinking about how do your real estate decisions interplay with reputation and the company's public relations and other event planning and servicing of the
So
employees.
I just I know we're running short. Jim, can you tell the quick story about the art, since Laurie brought it up? Sears and Roebuck, the art. You got to tell the story.
All right. Arthur Martinez was he was the chairman. He started in September 1st, 1992. And he was trying to transform Sears. So he was having a board meeting down at the Art Institute of Chicago, felt compelled to buy a sculpture, a 15,000 or 15-ton piece of artwork. By the same token, in the following 3 to 4 months, he decided to eliminate retiree health benefits. So the day that the piece of art was to be delivered to headquarters on a semi-truck, there were 200 retirees and a former pilot who was flying over with a banner that said Sears unfair to retirees. And I have a 15-ton piece of artwork being driven up up about 5 miles out when I get the call. And what are we going to do with this artwork? We cannot, it was not a prudent decision. So we hid it. We had to make a rapid fire decision, divert the truck, move it over to this parking lot till we find a warehouse to store it in. It is now on display at Notre Dame University, where we donated the piece of art. It never hit our headquarters at all. Arthur left and I was stuck with the art, so I donated it to Notre Dame.
So that obviously shows everybody how, as you've all mentioned, how your job goes way beyond real estate. You talked about reputation, art, public relations. And I'm looking at the clock. I guess we got 2 minutes, David.
We do.
I don't see anything in the chat. Any questions? I know we could have gone on a lot longer. We said this from the beginning, but I think that, what everyone has to, here we go. We got one question. How does it's from Herb. How does the C, and then it stopped, Herb. How does the CRE get paid? How does corporate real estate get paid? I think we talked about it earlier. I mean, you're getting paid by salary, but the question was where is it funded? And, my understanding is it could come from corporate general budget. but I don't know. I'll let you answer it, Warren and Jim.
Just typically, it's like any other salaried employee, base salary,
I
benefits.
mean, he means the external advisor.
Oh, is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's done, whether it's through a commission, percentage of, whether it's a percentage of savings, whether it's an hourly rate. Laurie, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that front.
Yeah, I mean, it's typically, they're engaged through sourcing. I mean, depending on the company, some companies may do it directly, and others may do it more centrally, engage them through sourcing, and then they get paid through the company's enterprise payment system.
How about Jim? What about Sears?
Well, we had, we were kind of like many retailers, we kind of a freestanding organization. So we controlled, now tax appeal work was all incentive. And, but it was, we would control the payment through our corporate entity, which
So
helped
we
real
got a
estate.
good question because we've talked about this earlier. So if cold calling isn't going to work, how does a service provider meet corporate real estate people? I could answer it, but I'm sure you guys we'll start with Warren.
So, that's why we're members. That's why you have designations. So I would most definitely start at that level, as well as through relationships. Just follow the breadcrumbs, but I can tell you, yeah, cold calls aren't very effective.
I know Sarah Abrams, who was in Detroit speaking, said, get on committees. I will watch you on a committee to see how valuable you are. And that will tell me how valuable you would be in real life. But if you're just going to hang out and do nothing, I would have said maybe join Cornet, go to some of those committees, maybe you're a counselor, maybe you're a SI or whatever it is. I think the easiest way is to show how sincere you are in your volunteer work. Jim, how about on your side? ICSC or?
Well, ICSC is a big one for retailers. The other thing I might suggest is to align yourself, understand who who a major landlord is, and go through if you have a relationship with that landlord, they can direct you on how to best get into the organization. And because they have an interest, you're not aligning with the landlord, but you have a relationship with the landlord committee. Any retailer of any size is going to have relationships with the landlords, and they're gonna and a landlord can help you in terms of navigating through the corporate maze.
David, I'm looking
Hey,
at the
Rob,
clock. It's
yeah,
2:02.
up against the hour, but maybe as the questions continue to come in, maybe Rob, you could follow up
Sure.
to those. But I just want to thank Rob, Laurie, Warren, and Jim. Really fantastic. Your unique and authentic insights in the corporate real estate space, its function across industries, its strategic and tactical role, both within and on behalf of an organization, its metamorphosis, as you described, all the shared stories of pain points and challenges faced and the impacts of future work, AI, prolonging resilience and sustainability, and really on how service providers can add value to in-house real estate departments. You talked about to get is to give, listen, read the room, especially under a trend of outsourcing, all invaluable insights. So thank you again. For those of you new to our webinars, I just want to encourage you to consider engaging a credentialed counselor of real estate when seasoned advice or a solution to a complex issue, real estate matter is needed. Or perhaps you might want to consider becoming one of us and seek an invitation to membership in the council organization. If so, please visit cre.org to learn more. And lastly, please join us in mid-November for another What's Next webinar entitled Vacant to Vibrant, the Keys to Commercial Conversions. Look for details soon. And until then, and on behalf of the Councils of Real Estate, thank you for attending this session of What's Next for Real Estate and the Life Experience.